And on this episode, I am blessed to be joined by the one and only Ben Williams.
It took a year to get clean, get fit enough, get past medicals to even be considered. There was a lot of people which, along that year of getting clean, you know, I was ditching the social group, I was changing, I was like, you're going to be a Marine, you fucking look at the state of you. I'm here, I'm at the gate, and that's a big thing. And, you know, lots of people seem quite scared and worried, and I was excited. I'm at 9 years, and then I'm looking at Special Forces career, and then the doctor's going, you're going to be a civilian, mate. And that was it, the sort of, fuck, what do I do? So business world I look at, even in sport, I work quite closely with, you know, elite sports teams, and it's how often are you subjecting them to pressure away from what they're used to? And that's what drew me towards doing more entrepreneurship. You know, going into entrepreneurship was I wanted to have an impact, start standing side by side to these people as opposed to sitting below them and thinking they're better than you. But just from my journey in life so far to my mid-30s, it's all come from belief. I believe I will pass the test. I believe I'll become a commando. I believe I will build my business to an exit. I believe my family will be safe and well.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. On this podcast, we talk to an amazing range of people. And we talk to these people about risk. Risks they've taken in their lives, risks they've taken in their careers, when they paid off and when they didn't.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's a privilege.
So we had one of my favorite ever first conversations with someone I've ever spoken to. It's probably like 6-7 months ago now, something like that. And, you know, your backstory is so inspirational. And I know that it's something you've spoken about at length. And I am going to make you speak about it today. Just because I think, you know, one of the things I love about this podcast is in life, I think we need to see things to believe them. You know, we need to see that there are people who have beaten the odds, who have defied everything stacked against them to get where they are, because someone will hear that, someone will see that, someone will listen and say, wow, I can do that. You know, and ultimately I think it's the responsibility of people who have done those amazing things to be a shining light and to inspire as many as possible. So when you told me your story and you know, seeing the podcast you've been on previously, I was inspired. You know, and I think you are such an inspirational character, man. I don't say that a lot. So thank you so much for coming on. And I would love to just get to, you know, where it started. Obviously, I want to talk about Loopin as well, but tell us a bit about your backstory and how you've ended up as an entrepreneur.
I thought you said we had 45 minutes. I'll wind it into 2. I spoke about it at length. I think I love the word responsibility. You know, it's the correct word to use, especially as you begin to find your feet somewhere or you've experienced something, whether that's good or bad, is to be able to share that. And it is a responsibility. And I actually see it as a responsibility as a sort of male. You know, I'll come on to my background shortly. But I do believe that being a male may be seen with stigma as an alpha male from where I come from, which is the military, that we have a responsibility to share our good times, but as much, if not more, our bad times, because it does inspire. And yeah, my backstory is sort of up and down. Everyone's had their own rocky road. I'm not the kind of broken wing story person. It's like my story is worse than everyone else's. Yeah. You know, family didn't go to plan in the early days, and my parents split up, and it wasn't the best break, and we moved around a lot of schools, lots of change of faces, and you know, my mum finding a partner who didn't really sort of step up as a father figure that my brother and I needed at the time. And I found myself sort of a bit of a lost, bewildered child where, you know, I thought I knew it all. Mm. And I know one of your final questions is quite a hard hitter, so I'll save that answer. But I thought I knew it all, but I knew nothing. And I also had no real direction of where I wanted to go. And really interestingly, when I was sort of 6, 7, you know, my kid's age now, I was the guy with the stick and the cam cream and wanting to be in the military and running around. I loved it. And part of divorce weekends, as I now sort of categorize them as, was when we went to see Dad, he would take us to military museums. And there's no military background in our family apart from one person. I think it's just where he took us to shut us the fuck up. And one of those places was the Royal Marines Museum in Portsmouth. I remember just being besotted by these images of these people, these heroes, these warriors. And that was my calling, that for someone else that might not be. But for me, it was like, wow. And it wasn't about war or blood or brutality. It was about earning something very elite. And even at sort of 7 years old, I could understand that. And that's where I wanted to go. But I lost that dream. I lost that focus as I went through all the school changes. And when you can't fit in properly, and I didn't help myself, I was a heavy metal fan. I painted my nails black, had spiky hair, so I was never going to fit in properly.
Yeah.
I was with the dweebs in the memorial garden, and that's where I ended up. And that's fine. I was part of the dweeb gang for a while. But to try and fit in, I sort of tried to take on a different route. People were smoking weed and doing stupid shit. So I started to join in on that, and that kind of got me noticed, and that gets you in with the sort of cooler crowd, if you can call it that. But I didn't have control over using any of that type of stuff, and I smoked more and more weed. And then I was coming towards the end of school, and I kind of just wanted to fuck off and just do my own thing. And, fair play, I've got a really tight, close relationship with my mum. Mm-hmm. And she was like, just at least finish sixth form or do something useful like that and then see what you want to do. Because I wasn't going to go uni or travel the world. And I probably wasn't going to be a bricklayer either or anything like that. I just didn't know what to do. And so I went into sixth form. And then as I started to progress through sixth form, I started to do weights, and I was doing quite a bit of boxing at the time. And I was getting a little bit wrapped up into the alpha version of someone, or trying to be alpha. And that led to one book and another book, and it was The Craze, and it was Lenny McLean, and I was watching too much of the wrong sort of stuff you should be watching that age. And then I just had this idea that I was going to be a bouncer. I'm in sixth form.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big lad. When I say weights, I mean, I'm not big. But I wanted to be in that. I wanted to be thrown into that and gain respect and be seen as that person. And I followed it, 17 and a half years old. I did some course to get a badge. And then bang on my 18th birthday, I was on the door.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a real eye-opener. I basically spent every weekend getting the shit kicked out of me for quite some time.
Where was this? Where in the country?
This is Bedford as well.
Right.
So it's got its rep. And then I started to, I suppose, be good at the job. I started using it as a proper job. Mm-hmm. And I was working 5 nights out of the 7 nights a week. And I was getting more and more wrapped up in the wrong things. I was getting bigger. I was starting to abuse steroids. And that's where drugs really took over. And I was, confiscating cocaine and using it for myself. And
how old are you at this age? Still like 19, 20? Or?
Yeah, I've left sixth form and starting to, this is it for me now. I'm going to be a full-time bouncer apparently. And then, I moved to Milton Keynes. I started working a lot of the doors in Milton Keynes. I got sort of known in that area, hanging out with the wrong people. And then it all went wrong, unfortunately, on a particular evening. There was a fatality in the nightclub, and everyone was arrested for murder, and then it all went very south. And unfortunately, I was caught up in that. No one was guilty, but it was treated like that until it was found not guilty. And we went through manslaughter and all those horrible things. And I remember thinking, fucking hell, I'm in deep here, really deep. And all those people in my life who had been like, mate, is this the right thing for you to do, were suddenly right. And unfortunately, there's now a bereaved family and all those horrible things. And I was just in so deep. That lost me my job, naturally. I didn't have anything to work towards. And my life just sort of spiraled out of control at that point. Drugs became the go-to. That was the escape. And further on down there, I just started to slip into quite a dark world. And that dark world led to not wanting to be here anymore. And then just on the sort of luck of a day when I was sort of down and out and thinking maybe this is the day where I should take my own life, I saw an advert for the Royal Marines. And it was, I'm not a fate believer. I've been in the odd situation where I don't think fate got me out of it. I think it was luck. We can come on to those. But I looked at it and thought, God, if there's a calling, that's a calling right now. Get a fucking grip of yourself. Now. And that was it. It was no like I'm sober moment. There was no like I'm super fit, here I go. It took a year to get clean, get fit enough, get past medicals to even be considered. Yeah. But what it gave me was a purpose. And it took me back to that inspiration that young boy had at 7 years old, which I felt I was indebted to him. You know, he got me there. It wasn't the 18-year-old tough doorman. It was the young 7-year-old who follows their dream. And I took that little boy's ethos, and, you know, a year later from deciding I was going to join the Marines, I arrived at the gates of the Commando Training Centre.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And clearly, though, you have something within you that said, no, I'm not going to give up. You know, I'm not going to go down the route which so many people don't come back from, right? For every, you know, one story there is of someone who turns their life around, there are 100 stories of people who go to the bottom of the barrel. And I've had great friends who've gone to the bottom of the barrel and not come back. You know, so there's clearly a mentality within you that, whether it was the Marines, whatever it might have been, but that thing inside you which was awakened at this point by an advert for that, clearly there's a mentality within you that knew that you could go to the heights and achieve what you wanted to.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think it brings you on to setting up a business and entrepreneurship. I suppose we'll talk about it shortly. Is, you know, this is all about risk, this podcast. Well, the risk is you carry on going the way you're going and you end up at the bottom of that barrel. And I've, like yourself, many friends who have done it. And, you know, worse so, Marines that I know have done it, where they've got that mindset, and yet they even still reach a point where they can't be here anymore. And I think my moment of the internal struggle was the realization that I actually had quite a lot going for me, and being able to tap into that as a resource, as opposed to, I've got a lot going for me, I'm throwing it all away, and turning it into I've got not much left to lose right now, so why not fucking turn it into something pretty useful? And there was a lot of people which, along that year of getting clean, you know, I was ditching the social group, I was changing. I was like, you're going to be a Marine, you fucking look at the state of you. And I never did it to prove people wrong, but that was an energy. That was a fuel. That was all right.
Yeah, of course, right? Everyone's got their drivers. And I think all the most successful people I've spoken to, everyone has got a mix of wanting better and something to prove to someone, or to themselves, but something to prove for sure.
I think it's for me, it was to myself. Yeah. It was to myself. And I always say this, that one of the proudest days of my military career, I did 10 years in the Marines, and one of the proudest days was the day I joined. You know, the day I walked through the gates with an ironing board, in a shit cheap suit, with a shaved head, rabbit in headlights, thinking, this is going to be fucking hard work. I looked around and I thought, wow, I'm here. I've made it further than so many other people have ever made it, just to get to the gate. Now I have 32 weeks to not fail or get injured, and there's other statistics around that, but I'm here. I'm at the gate, and that's a big thing. And, you know, lots of people seem quite scared and worried, and I was excited, and I was like, I am at the Commando Training Centre. There's only one in the world. It's got a huge amount of respect within the military, and I'm here. And I think that became a bit of fuel for me for quite a while within Commando Training. It soon eats into you, and you regret every decision you made, and it's shit. And when you're sat in Wales and it's raining and you're just looking at a sheep at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're questioning every fucking decision you've made. And you look in your bank balance, it's just as bad as a startup founder's bank balance. You're like, this is shit.
So you're in good stead for the next part of the journey then.
Yeah, always bootstrapping.
Yeah. But out of interest, you know, when you are in those really tough moments in training, and I can imagine, you know, I can only imagine not just the mental element of it, but the physical endurance that you have to go through, and breaking down every single barrier you have in order to be that person. How much were you able to draw on your experience from those darkest days and be like, well, if I can get through that, I can do this?
It's really interesting. I was talking to one of the Stride VC lot last year, Gabby. I caught up with him recently as well about this, and I talked about, he said, you must be breezing through this founder life. And I was like, no, it's literally the hardest thing I think I've ever done. Wow. And he called bullshit. He was like, bullshit. Yeah. I was like, it's not bullshit, because the stress and the adversity you're exposed to within a training simulated environment or a operational environment, which is very different, but both are stress that you're encountering in acute ways. So it's like, this is happening, this is extremely stressful, your adrenaline state's being tested beyond belief, physically, mentally, you're pushed. whether that, like I said, is peacetime or in the face of battle. When you look at the startup world or business, that stress state's not acute. It's prolonged. It's continuously on. You're always thinking about it at night. You're always worrying about the next paycheck for everyone. You're worried about that runway. What's that customer think of the product? Your stress levels, your adrenaline, your cortisol is always getting released. And for me, the military, and I don't mind saying this on Startup and Founder podcasts, and when we're talking about business, I've got the right to say that I felt like the military was easier in a way to what we do now. And that's just because of how your body is under, and your mind is under so much stress at the moment. But going back to that point around, it doesn't mean that's harder or easier, but it's more prolonged, I think, outside in the civilian world. But in the military, what they're doing is they're exposing you to yourself again and again and again. And those limitations that you think you have, they can push you further past them and onwards to another level that you never thought existed. And that's the bit I draw on now, where, yeah, this is shit. I'm trying to get term sheets signed and everyone's saying no, or they want it for this, or they want it for that, or this customer's moving away. Doesn't matter. It's something that tomorrow I'll be able to just slightly reset and then go again. And the military taught me that ability, which is useful.
That's so interesting. And does the military teach you the ability to almost disregard your thoughts, in the sense of you think that's where the barrier is, you think that's where the hurdle or the wall that you can't go past? But obviously the body can go past it. The brain gives up before the body, right? How much can you utilize that now in a startup environment? You're like, don't listen to those thoughts, get through, keep on battling. Do you see the relevance there?
Yeah, I think it's more regular in this startup world than it probably was in the military. I think we call it exposure equals composure. So the more you're exposed to, well, anything, too much success breeds bad habits. A lot of adversity is going to push you in the right direction, but too much is going to push you over the edge. The more we expose ourselves to things, the more we learn. But we call it exposure equals composure in the military, in the Marines especially, that the more you expose a young recruit to a difficult environment and then feed back to them and teach them and mentor them within that situation and just after the situation, they're going to learn, and they're learning under control. And then when you come to combat, my first experience of combat when I got shot at, I fucking hid and didn't do anything correct. And you learn from that very quickly and go, that was the wrong thing to do. That's the wrong tactic. That's not what we're trained to do. You're trained to do this. And you can't, some are just equipped and adapt to that situation very quickly. Most people go, shit, someone's trying to fucking kill me.
Yeah, I would be hiding.
Yeah, there's like a Ben-shaped hole in the compound next to us. But the next time it happens, you're just slightly more composed under the stress and the intensity of it. And then, before you know it, going down the road, you're quite composed around it all. And it's not the point of composure where you just stood there and be like, well, nothing's going to hit me now. It's the point of composure that you can deal with the challenge that you're facing, the ability to think under pressure and stress and fatigue. And the military in training builds that up within you to the point where you then have to go and operate it. And I think in startup world, it's very much like, okay, well, the investors have said this, or the board think this. They're not going to kill me for a start. And
very few investors.
Yeah.
There's a couple.
Yeah, if they're on the board, you've signed the wrong person. But you do sort of compose yourself around that. My first board meeting, I was sweating and I didn't know what to do, and I'm like, fucking numbers are here and all sorts of shit. And then come the last few, they were even like that, but they were just slightly more composed. And I think you're dealing with such difficult stuff in a startup as well. Everything's broken.
Yes.
Nothing's right. Everything's negative. So the stuff you're reporting is shit. So you got to deal with that pressure of the awkward questions and that challenge. So
yeah. I mean, there's so much super interesting stuff in that, Ben. One thing that I always remember reading about when I was studying this, because I studied international conflict. I'm fascinated by that side of things. And one of the things I wish I'd learned more around was the fear-violence nexus. And essentially this idea that you can have in training scenarios people who are incredibly accurate, they're amazing at that, but as soon as you put them into a combat environment, because of this very, very deep biological fear violence, i.e. the ability to actually execute violence against the person, or the fear of death or being hit, totally changes for many people their ability to be effective in those environments. So out of interest, is that something that you saw, that you might have someone who's amazing in training, but then actually when push comes to shove, it doesn't really work that way? And how do you think that sort of, seeing the difference between the training environment and the real life one, and then, doing the board prep and then executing in the board meeting, right? Because I see that a lot as people who are like, great, yeah, in the one-to-one, then you put them loose into, the high pressure environment, and all the training in the world disappears.
Yeah, it's that coping mechanism, isn't it, under stress and that pressure. And I think there's that imposter that's often there as well. Within a training environment, it's quite secure. If they're under your wing, they're being mentored by you, and it's in the environment, the comfort zone, as we call it. If they're in the comfort zone all the time, and then they're exposed to a challenging environment that they're not used to, and they're not experienced it much before, that's when you're going to see them fall apart quite a bit. And this is the thing that kind of, I wince when I go into other companies, and whether that's putting Loopin in or just talking to them and running workshops, it's like, how often are you exposing your people to discomfort? Not very regularly. And that's not a fault of a company. I think there's a real lack of understanding of how do you create high performance, and high performance stems from resilience and often failure. And what you want to be doing, again, exposure equals composure. You want to subject people to talking to a group of people or a team that they don't regularly speak to. Like, oh shit, people are looking at me, they're judging me. Oh, I'm trying to remember something. But you do it, and again, in a controlled environment where they're uncomfortable, but it's not going to hinder their career, or it's not going to all fall apart. And then as you progress them, you can then put them into a challenge environment where they are in front of the board, or they are talking to someone which they didn't think they'd be talking to, and there are stakes. That's the difference. Where stakes are present, they're not present. But you can create stakes all the time. You can create those environments where people, they feel like they're being judged. Public speaking is the best place to start. Again, how do you do it in the Marines? Like, you're always subjecting people in training to these perceived military environments. But we also did things like hot topics where you could stand up and you're going to talk about a helmet for 10 minutes, unprepared. And you stand up in front of 30 Marines on a course, and you're like,
that can't be easy.
It's not. The Mark 5 helmet goes on your head and is ballistic, and you just cut, and everyone's like, boring, and they're judging you, and it's shit, and it's falling apart, but it's controlled. And we do that for a reason, because it's not just about, yomping and being fatigued and then shooting and doing your job. It's also about being able to just cope with pressure.
Yeah.
And so business world, I look at, even in sport, I work quite closely with elite sports teams, and it's how often are you subjecting them to pressure away from what they're used to, and that's where you see that performer. And so in the military, we did that a lot. So when the shit hit the fan, more often than not, you'd see people step forward and not cower away. And that was the Marines' attitude. There are other regiments which aren't exposed to warfare as much as the Marines are, so when it happens, they're way out their comfort zone, don't know how to deal with the situation, and fall apart. You can't blame them. And you can't blame the people on your team. It's about finding them a way to go from your comfort zone to discomfort, controlled discomfort, and growing with that. And that's within everyone. But you are right. There are those people which just completely fall apart, and those that excel.
It's fascinating, though, that exposure piece is so key. And I love the idea of how do you expose people within, their usual comfort zone to really step out of that. And I think that's an amazing way of looking at it. I mean, how big is the team now at Loopin, and how much are you finding all these leadership skills that you've amassed over time is really, coming home to roost with the business you've got now?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. We've gone through our ups and downs. We've kept the team quite small. We're 6-7 people at the moment. We were bigger. We had to make some moves, like many other businesses unfortunately did. I feel it's been one of the hardest leadership curves I've ever experienced in leading civilians, but just diverse civilians, where not just culturally diverse, but skill set diverse. I come from a world where it is very alpha male. There's no hiding from that. There is a particular way to talk to an alpha male. There's a particular way to lead an alpha male. And also it's an environment, it's a an organization where it's mission focused, it's objective focused, it's very values heavy. Whereas we have that in our business, and many other businesses have that, but it's not something that people would go and get tattooed into their skin, like you would find with Marines and other people, like mine's under my jumper here. It's less so. It's career based. People are stepping stone. I want to be in a startup, and then I want to go do a growth, and then I want to do this. And so you're dealing with lots of different things. And I think that was the strangest thing for me to get to grips with, in terms of like, oh, you're not all here to like shed blood and tears and not sleep at night. You're here to get paid. We're not all dying
for this.
Okay. So that was that's tested me. But one of the best things that's happened is one of our investors, our original investors, bought a coach with him. And he said, as part of me investing, the only caveat I have for investing into the business is that you have coaching.
Wow.
And you have executive coaching. And so I've been working with an executive coach, which he brought in, and, you know, really, really good coach, Liz, who's been top of Barclaycard, Visa, and
that's awesome.
Proper executive coach. He pays for her. And she gives us, you know, gives me a couple of weeks a month, twice a month, to work on what's been going wrong. How can I change this? How can I be better with my team? Because I know we'll grow over the next year. If Loopin goes well for what we're sat on now, it could be quite a big organization. And knowing my limitations, and when do I as a CEO step aside and put a new CEO in place, and where's that inflection point for me, and learning to be humble and understanding how civilians operate differently to Marines. You know, when we're overdue on a sprint, you just can't take them outside and thrash them to a fucking
almost I can imagine
dying.
That wouldn't be great for retention. Yeah.
HR on your case. So it's about helping me transition those true leadership qualities from that operational military environment and applying it to business, and that has been a huge growth curve for me.
I think it's amazing that you speak about coaching, and I think it's such an important one, because, you know, we've discussed this before about the brutal realities of the founder journey, and I think a lot of time founders feel like they have to be this all-knowing, you know, just never questioning, never showing the single sign of potential lack of understanding for what they're doing. But I have a coach, I have a therapist, you have a coach. Most of the most effective CEOs, entrepreneurs I know have those support systems. We don't talk about it enough. And I think it's great to hear that you've been using one and found that valuable. And that's amazing of an investor to have that. Out of interest, was that investor an ex-entrepreneur themselves?
Yeah, he's one of the Adyen team. Yeah, so he'd done his big IPOs, he'd done very well himself. They all say it, don't they? It's lonely at the top. Or lonely in the middle.
Yeah, lonely in the sandwich.
Exactly. Lonely in the sandwich. And having a coach, I found, has really helped sort of frame things and change a perspective on stuff, because it is easy to be like, how fucking dare they question me on that? And it's I'm a hothead, you know, I've done a lot of coaching and training to not fly off the handle, and try and keep my calm with people, and thankfully I'm proud of that. You know, I've got. I was going to say
you're the calmest person in the room, as far as I can tell.
It's under the table. Yeah, she's worked with me to work on my characters, and I love this principle that at first I laughed about it, like this village in your head. And I was like, what, the village people? I genuinely looked at them as Indians, cowboys, and, you know, all that stuff. She's like, no, you idiot. You have different characters in your head. And the one which was leading me for too long was this quite aggressive, hot-headed, you know, stereotypical, not great person. And she found a way to give that person a voice, but put them to the side and park them and let them be present, but also bring someone else forward. And it also really helped me drop my imposter syndrome, which was, I'm not an executive, I'm not the suit. But she found that person within me to be able to come forward. And he doesn't dress in a suit, but he has the attitude of that person in a suit. And that's been the big growth thing for me, to come forward and understand now, how do I help my team do that and lead the business forward?
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea of bringing out that character and personifying it and just seeing it for what it is, and being able to not remove it, but just address it in that way. I think that's such a powerful technique. And it always fascinates me, like the overlap between coaching and therapy. Like for me, my executive coach sessions are almost like therapy sessions. Don't know if you found the same.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting on that part. So from military to business owner, what was that initial switch like, and what made you take that leap?
Well, I'd done 10 years of risk, and I'd done my operational tours. On one particular tour, I was blown up and injured, and I lost some of my hearing in it. So I spent quite a bit of my career hiding my hearing, and my whole journey, I wanted to go special forces. I had no. If you said to me years ago, "Oh, you're going to be running an AI or a company that's leveraging AI to do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be selling to these markets," I'd have gone, fuck off. This is where I'm going. And my ambition was to go down the SBS route and, follow that path. And injury prevailed. And unfortunately, I tore my Achilles. And then the second time, my hearing was found out to not be very good because they'd changed the test. And I was at my almost 10-year point. I'm at 9 years. And then I'm looking at special forces career, and then the doctor's going, "You're going to be a civilian, mate." And that was it. The sort of, fuck, what do I do? And I think I'd been exposed to such sort of stressful states and ups and downs that I was kind of ready not to just step from the military into a comfortable job. I didn't want to work for a system anymore. Ironically, I do now because I have investors and I've got my own business, so it's probably more political than I expected. But it's still within my control.
Yeah.
And when I was leaving the Marines, sort of 12 months before leaving, I worked with England football, and that opened up a door for me where I got to know the players. I got to know Gareth quite well, and I thought there's something in the way we think as Marines that can be transferred here, and it's not what everyone thinks it is, where it's like, I'm a leader, I'm going to tell you how to lead, or we're going to go on activity days and you're going to get wet and cold, and that's going to teach you resilience. I was more around the culture and the values of how we operate and how you can then bring some of that across to bring into your high performance. And what does resilience really look like? And exposure equals composure is exactly that. You just submit people to it in different ways. So I picked up all my coaching qualifications and teaching qualifications. So I'm going to use these. I was working with recruits at the time, and I just set up a little business. And it was a terrible business. Like I had 2 clients. One's my mum, and now she was free. And then someone else I was doing workshops for. It was called Williams Elite.
Love it.
The logo was a puzzle piece, and on the back was me with a weapon. And I was like,
yes.
I found it the other day. I was like, fucking hell, was this my first business card?
That's amazing.
It's like,
That's
here's
incredible.
the puzzle and here's a gun. But
what more do you need?
what more do you need?
That's it. You're done.
Do you know what the irony of that as well? When was it? A year later into doing that, no one gives a shit about your card. They buy you, and that's what I started to realize. Take off the tie, don't wear the shirt necessarily, just be you. And we, Tomo, my business partner, and I won a contract with HSBC coaching, and we couldn't believe our luck. It was a 6-figure contract for the 2 of us to go in and teach 3,000 employees around mindset in groups.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, they're going to find out soon. I don't know what they're going to find out, but they're going to find out we shouldn't be delivering this national engaged program. And low 6 figures, but it's above where we ever got to in our any career. And I was like, shit. And the head of people rang us up one day. He's like, I've got some questions. Fuck, this is the moment they're going to find us out.
Was this before you delivered it?
This isn't far off the start line.
Fine.
It's like, shit, hang on, have we got their signature yet? No, fuck. And he said, we were having a chat, and it was all good. It was fine. It was all good. And then his last question was, I've got a question about your logo, because we've moved on from the puzzle piece and guns. We're now on a helmet, a Spartan helmet with a laurel around it and an arrow going through it. And he was like, yeah, just a quick one. Your logo's in front of me on my desk. Don't I look like a security team? I was like, is that what you see? And he was just like, yeah, I've not really looked into it before, but yeah, just if you wanted my perception. I was like, fucking hell. So it was a massive wake-up call to, okay, I need to learn this thing called branding and marketing. But also a huge piece of it was people aren't buying my business card. They're not buying the website or the logo. They're buying me and they're buying Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped us go on our journey to understand, get in a room and have a conversation with someone. They'll buy your product and you deliver them a great service for that reason. And that's what drew me towards doing more entrepreneurship, going into entrepreneurship, was I wanted to have an impact. It's not about becoming wealthy for me. That's a byproduct, and I suppose we can talk about that. But it's about having an impact. I want to see people use our products. I want someone to ring me or email me and go, fucking hell, what you said last week really helped me consider this challenge I was facing. And it's things like that that's the true identity of creating a real business. And you're solving problems for people and you're providing solutions, and in return they pay you money for it. And that's what I really saw. And I think there's just this embedded probably psychopath which just doesn't want to settle for normal either and just wants to go out and do scary things.
I mean, I think you make such an incredible point, and especially for this audience, of entrepreneurs, founders, investors as well. One of the things that I see, a lot of businesses fail to get out the gates on is they don't realize how much it is about them. You can be in, I call it the collateral trap, right? Making 3 million amendments to your deck at pre-seed, right? And going around that loop and getting advice. Oh, should I put this slide here? It's about you. Yeah. It's about you. And people need to realize that at the earlier stage, obviously once you're post-product and post-revenue, then there are other things that come into that equation. But at the start, it is all about you and your co-founder or team, whatever it might be. And I think that's one of the reasons why people, immediately saw the value in you and what you guys are doing, because of how much credibility you have.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big values that's drummed into you as a Marine is humility. And I think that's been my biggest struggle, is to come out the military and talk about your experiences and stay humble with them, but let people know what you've done and how it can help them as well. And, not in a name dropping way, but to go on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, I went in through his door in his living room and I was just like, all right, like hands in pocket, way different to Simon Sinek and Ant Middleton and all the other people that he has walked through that door. Just me. And we did the podcast, and then afterwards I had to ask him, I think I said this before, I smirked, I was like, you ran out of guests, didn't you? Because it was in and around COVID. And he was like, no, he smiled and winced with it. I was like, yeah, you did. You run out of A-list, so you brought the Z-list in. And he was like, no, I'm going to stop you there. And he was quite blunt on it. He's like, you've got a great story, much like other people have, and people deserve to hear it, and you deserve to tell it. And it did sort of stop me in my track, having a joke around it, where I left and thought, okay, he's got a point. Like, it's not just me. I want to go and find other people out there who have similar stories and can tell it to someone else. And that's ultimately where we're now going with our product, is doing that through technology and helping other people, which we can come on to, share more of their content, share more of their thinking. And that, for me, was a big wake-up call to go, start standing side by side to these people, as opposed to sitting below them and thinking they're better than you, and not thinking you're ever better than them, but you have the right to be in the room. And I think more and more people should have that respect for themselves, men and women. We talk about suicide at the start. That's because a lot of people have a lot of lacking self-belief that they deserve to be around a group of people, or they're missing that environment that they should be part of. Find your way into it and get into it and enjoy being there. You learn so much, you grow so much, it gives you so much, and then you can go to another group and learn even more. And I just see so many people walking around in their bubbles these days where they're missing out on so much around them and then blaming themselves for missing it. And you just think you have the right to be in those groups of whoever that is. Go be around those people, enjoy it. Yeah,
I think you've put that perfectly. And it goes back to what we were saying before we started, which is people need to see it to believe it. That's why especially what you guys are doing with Loopin, the ability to really amplify these stories, it is so important, because the amount of people that I know who have heard a story and it's captured them, it's inspired them, it's something which speaks to them and says, oh, wait, I look like that, or that's my background, and look where they've gone when I think I've got no options. That is genuinely how we change the world. If we believe that we're part of a system where elites control the way that things operate. And I think there is a lot to be said for that. The way that we can change the world is to inspire people on a micro level, on an individual level, to say you can make a change by just taking control and realizing what you can achieve when someone's laid out a path for you already on this. So I think it's super powerful. But for everyone's benefit, Tell us about how Loopin's helping with that.
Yeah, that's you know what it's like in a startup. It's sort of changes every single day, doesn't it? The genesis of Loopin was working in that coaching environment after the Marines and being around teams in and out of sport, in business, seeing how they function, the dysfunction, and how there was a lot of technology, but a lot of legacy technology of measuring engagement and morale and how people feel. And then over here you've got L&D, and it's like L&D never talk to engagement and vice versa. And we saw this problem between managers and employees in the disconnect, and then how much of an impact, that positive or negative, but it's an impact that manager can have on the employees and the organization. And you have top co and you have senior leadership sort of filtering down information, objectives, mission, where we're heading. Then you have the management layer, and then you have, although that's very thick and highly leveled, but you have a management layer, and then you have employees. And there's this fascinating statistic at the moment. There's 2.4 million, I think it's more now, but there's around 2.4 million unskilled or accidental managers in the workplace.
Wow.
And these are the people who are actually, these are the catalysts for change in a business. They're either going to drive it in a great way, or they're going to fuck it because they don't want to do it, or they're not showing how to do it. And then 75% of people leave the organization because of their manager. There's huge well-being statistics, engagement, productivity, retention, absenteeism. It's all related to that relationship between the manager and employees. So we looked at this and thought, how can you fix this? How can you make it better? And it's a massive problem we decided to take on, which was, why don't we use a form of social connection where people share how they are, whether that's privately or openly or only with their co-workers, and you use that as a sentiment analysis, and then you apply that to essentially generative AI that provides learning tools, advice, knowledge, resources for the manager that they can use in bite-sized chunks. So rather than having just your HR sheep dip workshop, or here's your speaker about leadership, all right, back to your desks and crack on, see how you get on, and then we'll do the next course in 6 months' time. You can still do those, but you want that void in the middle to be filled with something. And technology is a way to do that. I don't ever believe a company should never have holistic hands-on training, but it should have something more to facilitate what's trying to be taught into that organization. And so using this data that we can bring in and applying it to generative AI, we can create solutions for managers in real time of how to address a problem that might be in their team. So your team's at risk of burnout. Here's 3 things to do. This is the person to talk to. This is what to do about it. And this is how we recommend you change it tomorrow. And it's really simple. And you tick box it. Okay, I could do that. It's up to the manager whether they do it or not.
Sure.
But at least you're putting it in front of them. And you can measure who does it and who doesn't by who ticks what as well. So that's like the complicated variation of what we do, and we're deploying it. People are paying for it. It's a slower, harder sell because it's an enterprise model.
Sure.
We don't want it to be an enterprise model, but we're on that train. We work quite a lot with marketing agencies as well. That's where there's project base. So recruitment agencies, marketing agencies, ad agencies. Seen a lot of activity there. But then what fell out the back of Loopin was, oh, hang on, if you're taking data and applying it to generative AI, and you're able to feed a model with a load of information, much like what GPT is, and it then spurts out knowledge back to that person, personalized to them, could you then fill that model with someone else's knowledge? So
interesting.
We took it and we're ego aside, I've got the books, I've got the podcasts, I've got a lot of material. So like, okay, well, the nearest person to the business is me, who has a lot of content, and I'm a coach. You know, that was my life beforehand. Let's feed it in and see what happens. So we fed it into the model, we built into a chat solution, and then I'm like, hi Ben, and I'm like, hey, how are you? And like this digital version of myself popped up. I was like, what the fuck? I've got a team of engineers and they don't seem to buy into values. What would you suggest to me to get them to believe into company values? And so it goes through all my books and podcasts, and it condenses the information with some insight into how I think, and like, if I was you, I would apply this. Is this helpful? Blah, blah, blah. So we trained the model in that way.
How real did it feel?
This is the next bit, because people are saying to me, well, we're going to use AI for therapy and coaching now. No. You use it as an AI resource that's attached to what you do. So it's not about turning you or me or anyone else into a coach and they never interact with you and you don't be a person, you're not near them anymore. You're still providing information. But what about that coach who goes to business, deploys some training, leaves? What happens in that void before they then come back? What if you then create a product where it's fed entirely on what they teach and train? You deploy the link and it's under their brand, and it's not necessarily Ben Coach AI. It could be Commando Mindset AI.
Yeah.
It's a real brand, it's a resource, and you tap into that. Okay, you've just been here a week ago doing some training, you said something about X, Y, and Z. Can you give me more information on that? You make that content more accessible. It's not going onto the internet, it's not trying to have to find it on YouTube. You're bringing that coach or that facilitator's information to the user.
That's so cool.
With
So
their
cool.
questions.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you start thinking about the applications of that, you could apply it to nutritionists, therapists, like anyone in that space, right? Where it's like, I still want to speak to you every week. I want to have that interaction. But if I've got something that I need help with in between that, it's a perfect solution.
Well, look at the podcast model. I've been on loads of podcasts. I'm just starting my own one up now. And I know there's not going to be any money in it for a long time, if any. And it's like that for many podcasters. And you have, like, Joe Rogan's. Well, I don't know what he's on. He must be on 2,000 now. He's near there.
Something like that, yeah.
So to go back and find information through Joe, I that's a big search ask. Like, I'm a bit of a Brian Cox geek. Mm-hmm. And so I'm listening to 2 of the 3-hour episodes that he's done with him. Like, come on, get to the black hole thing. But that is genuinely something that we want to tap into these days. People want to be like, oh, get to the point. Oh, what were those 3 things Ben talked to you about on your podcast about leadership? Here it is. So you look at that model. The only revenue in podcasts is sponsorship.
Yeah,
and if you can get that sponsorship over the line, then you've got to hold that sponsorship and you've got to keep the listenership for that sponsorship. But these people are bringing on incredible content. You're getting amazing people onto your podcast. I want to interact with what they said. I don't want to listen to every single episode again, but I want to condense it. Like, secret leaders, tell me the top 10 entrepreneurs you've had on and bring in fucking 3.
Yeah.
Or Roei, give me something from your podcast around X, Y, and Z around risk. And there's a model in that for itself where you can go back to podcasters and say, we'll do your material. Someone's going to do it.
Super interesting. I wonder what happens to long form content off the back of this.
It gets shorter.
Or does it just become a data source? It's like we do the long form content just to, provide something to go into the generative AI.
Not because I'm positioned where I am, but yeah, I think it will.
Yeah.
Because people's attention span's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The other thing is there's too much noise out there. So to filter through YouTube, filter through even going through LinkedIn or anywhere is just, there's a lot of noise. I want to get to the point, and that's a fair thing to be able to do. I'm very much that. I'll listen to the 2-hour podcast and then I'm probably not going to listen to it again. Yeah. But I want to take the snapshots from that podcast, and I don't want to read through the bio on Spotify. Yes. I just want, how does this relate to what I'm doing right now? Or, Roei, I'm thinking of starting a startup and I've listened to the last 10 episodes. Can you condense the last 10 into 3 bite-sized chunks that apply to my business today? Done. Yeah,
it's super useful. And you're right, like a lot of the long form stuff that I like, I never listen to the long form version of it, It's like Huberman Labs, right? I love it. But I'm never going to watch 4 hours of it, because who's got the time for that? But following him on Instagram, where it's condensed down to a minute and it's super retrievable, obviously not even nearly as retrievable as the way that you're discussing.
It is now.
Oh, is it?
Someone's done his podcast, I think without his...
Sure,
without his heads up.
Yeah,
it's happening.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I've got 5 questions that I want to ask you. The first question I've got for you is, what's the single biggest risk you've ever taken, and what was the outcome?
Well, I've run across some quite open fields when people are shooting at you, and I've not died.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Biggest risk is, deciding to leave the military into going into entrepreneurship and not going into a secure business. That was the biggest risk to do. 2 kids, a mortgage and a wife. And that family needs looking after, and I decided to go from warfare to boardroom warfare.
I love that. Boardroom warfare. I've not heard that
big
before.
risk.
Yeah, okay, that feels like a big risk. But obviously it's been a super exciting journey that you've been on, and I think just what we've been talking about now and we're talking about outside, I think you're hitting a really, really interesting spot. And a lot of people using generative AI badly. I think your use case of it is fantastic. So I think that's a really, really exciting one. What does it take to be successful?
I had this the other day. I found myself for the first time ever since the Marines say I'm proud of myself because I've landed investment deals and I've dealt with legals and I've done things I've never done before. And I think success to me, it's subjective, is to just look in the mirror and just be proud of the person who's looking back at you. It's not about the money or the cars or the houses. You know, that's a nice binary part, part that comes with it. It's I'm fucking happy with who's looking back at me. That's all that matters.
That is such a good answer. That is a great answer, man. I was speaking to my therapist recently, and he said someone was he was speaking to a new client, and the client flipped it back on the therapist and was like, well, you know, how was your life so together? Like, how you qualified this? And he goes, well, do you know what? I like myself. And the guy was like, yeah, fair play. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that is the most amazing definition of success. I love that. We've had 30 answers. I think that's going to be my top one. So now when someone searches the generative AI, what's the best definition of success on my podcast? You're coming up.
Yeah. So there we go. We'll build yours and then
there you
top
go.
search.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Is there anything you wish you did differently?
No, I think you arrive at points in your life where you do carry a bit of regret and a bit of concern for some of your life choices, and I definitely had that with the experience that I had before the Marines, and I'm sorry for things that took place there, and I can't avoid that they've happened. I'm where I am now because of what's happened before, and I have 2 wonderful children and an absolutely awesome wife who supports me through this, and I wouldn't have that had any decision been different. So no.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense, right? We are the culmination of our experiences, and our experiences have led us here.
Exactly.
What are you proudest of?
Well, like I said last Monday, I said I'm quite proud of myself at the moment. I'm proud that I've managed to have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old and not fucked it up. You know, it's somehow not like lost one or just where's the other child? Don't know, forgot about that one. So I'm proud of that, but I'm proud that I've taken the risks. You know, this is your podcast and this is what it's all about. You know, people look at risk as like, oh, they're brave to do that, to start a business. There'll be listeners listening to this now going, I wish I could start a business. What Roei and Ben are doing and all the other guests that have been on, fucking hell, they really embrace risk. It's like you have that ability to do it within yourself. Okay, every single person has that ability. You just got to take the step, and it's the ability to take the step. And I think for me is, you know, there's pride in that. There's the ability to take risk. There's the common sense of what risks to take as well. And that all culminates into exactly that and what makes you and forges you into who you are.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay, I'm super interested to hear what your answer to this next question is, because you're a man who has been through it all. What scares you?
It's hard, isn't it, to answer it with nothing, because you sound like some fucking arsehole who's not scared of anything.
If that's true to you, that's true to you.
I'm scared of... I think I'm not a happy, positive, negative person, but I'm scared of being unhappy again. And so I don't avoid it, and I don't turn away from my emotions or turn my back on anything like that. But I do always have in the back of my mind, there could be a time when you feel really low. And it's about being aware of when you feel low and feel really shit and down and out. I don't want to fucking do this anymore. I just want a normal job. The amount of times I've said to myself on this tech startup journey, I just want to be a postman. And then he's always, when you say that to yourself, he always posts something through the door and you're like, fuck, that looked easy. Part of my dog's biting his hand, bless him. But I think fear to me, you know, being scared is linked to fear. And if you can overcome how you react to fear, you should never run away from your fears. You should embrace your fears and you should run with them. I think people are always, you know, overcome them or drive through them or get around them. There's no, go with them. Your fear is giving you a response that you didn't have in your comfort zone. It's making you sharper. It's making you wiser. It's making you think. It's making you look in different areas you wouldn't normally look in. And that's taught you in the military. It's like that fear is an animal primordial instinct that's built within us to be able to look to survive. You need that. And so then being scared of a situation is not like, oh, fuck, what's going on? My knees are shaking. It's being able to understand that my adrenaline is at its height right now, but that's making me sharper. What am I looking for? What's my body telling me? And so it's not to be scared of a situation. It's to be able to understand your fears and work with those so you can then flourish on the other side of them. And that's why I don't scare much. Like, of course, there's the classic answers that I'm a parent. I'm scared that my kids could get ill or injured or horrible things like that. But, you know, in normality, try not to be scared of anything.
That's awesome, man. It's a amazing mindset that I've not come across before, but the idea of run with the fear. Don't cut through, run with. That's great.
Fear's your ally. It's always looked at as your enemy. Fear is your ally. And you know, I know we haven't got long left, but I could spend all day talking about this. You're only born with 2 fears. You know, having kids, they test these fears, and they're tested in reactions, and it's the startle reflex. They test for noise, so the nurse clicks around the child's ears and see if it flinches, and then they simulate dropping and they flinch. And it's believed, there's a lot of research around this, that they are the only 2 fears we're built with, because we can't do anything. We depend on our mother or our father around us. We're just a ball of flesh whining, you know. That's how my kids came in, one louder than the other. But these are our fears. But then along the way on our journey of life, we pick up all these other things that we bring in as fear. Go back to public speaking. What is 31 on your team, 35 on your team?
Yeah.
Most of those will hate standing up in front of people and talking. But that's not that they were born with that fear. No one comes out of the womb and goes, I am fucking shit myself about talking to people. Because every 2-year-old in the world, when you meet him, is like,
so true.
You learn through school that if you open your mouth at the wrong time, someone will call you a dickhead.
So true.
And then your adrenal response goes, physically, you feel like a dickhead. Don't do that again.
Wow.
So then you lock that away and you won't talk in that particular way, or you'll feel fear. And you think fear is a bad thing because Roy's asked you to stand up and talk in front of everyone. So your adrenaline response, you want to have a shit and you need a piss and you're shaking. This doesn't feel good. It's like, that's a great response. But over time, you trained yourself to be a negative response.
Yeah, to have that response to the wrong stimulus.
Exactly. And that's then attributed as fear. And then you want to run away from that. And then you don't progress towards that direction. And it's about trying to overcome that way of thinking that you become unstoppable because you've learned how you're responding.
Yes, that's it. Mate, amazing. Okay, my last one, although we could have done this for 10 hours, my last one is 15-year-old Ben walks in the room right now. What are you telling him?
Get out. He's a good guy. 15 years old, he was just going off the path. And I would say to him, you do need to turn a different direction. Things are going to go wrong for the next couple of years. But to believe in yourself. And I think it does sound cliche and everyone says believe in yourself. I think most people who would talk to their younger self, believe in yourself, you can do it. But just from my journey in life so far to my mid-30s, it's all come from belief. I believe I will pass the test. I believe I'll become a commando. I believe I will build my business to an exit. I believe my family will be safe and well. And I just want that 15-year-old who had no belief in themselves whatsoever, because I'm talking to many people with that mindset right now. You don't believe in yourself, you'll distract yourself with drugs, you'll distract yourself with alcohol, these different things. You don't need to think like that. You think with belief and courage that you can achieve what you believe you can achieve. And that's what I would tell him if he walked into the room now.
Ben, you're a legend. What do you want to plug?
Everything.
Go for it. Where can we find you?
LinkedIn, most active on LinkedIn, Ben Williams on LinkedIn. You can download or buy my book, Commando Mindset, or you can visit letsloopin.com to find out what we're doing, or coaching.letsloopin.com, which is where we're building our AI stuff. Connect with me. Let's have conversations. And I'm bumbling because there was one thing I was told to fit in. Lift music. While I think.
Is that the new album?
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. That was my email address.
Yes. Okay.
Fucking obvious. Ben@letsloopin.com. So come and have a chat.
You're a legend. Thank you so much, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.